Hello, this is Mark Dustin and Kevin Bauman, and our show Help Is Not on the Way. This is a show about all sorts of interesting things. There are predicaments and such that people have found themselves in throughout time and history, whatever that may be, and hopefully with some luck, they maybe even got out of some of them.
And help is not on the way, generally.
Help, but
right.
Yes, help, and if they got out of it,
right. It was generally that they did it themselves.
They probably pulled it off on their own.
Yep.
To some degree.
And this is episode 3.
This is episode 3.
Right.
Yeah. And we've got a couple of really interesting ones today. Kevin, you've got something interesting.
Yeah. Henry Johnson, the one-man army he was an African-American soldier in World War I, fighting in France.
Interesting.
Repelled a brigade of German soldiers by himself.
Wow. That's interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
Does not sound like it was on the way. We have another one later that's going to be it's a story of, do we call it a story of survival? It's a story of an attempt at survival.
Right.
Yeah, they're not all...
I mean, that's the thing, right? It's not always successful.
It's true.
In our stories.
Yeah, sometimes help would have been required.
Right.
Could really have helped.
We talked about whether people can do it or not. And we said that, no, you can't always do it.
You might be capable of doing something that you didn't think you were capable of, but that does not mean you were able to, did not mean the end did not come, the finish line did not come a few feet past where you finished.
That's right.
Yeah.
You fell just short.
You fell just short.
It was a good try.
That last bear at the end in the tunnel at the end of the hole.
That's right.
That one's the one that got.
And as we'll see, that happens.
It can happen.
That's right.
You never know when.
Right.
Sometimes it's you get there, and sometimes you eat the bear, and sometimes the bear eats you.
Right. So I'll get started then with Henry Johnson.
All right.
He was a soldier in the first African American unit of the United States Army to engage in combat in World War I. I had to read that straight from Wikipedia because I can't remember how to say that exactly. But he was a 5'4", 130-pound man, so not a large man.
Yeah.
He was born in
5'4", 130 pounds.
That's not large even.
Yeah.
I mean,
he could take Prince.
Yes.
But not by much.
Not by much. No.
Yeah.
He was born approximately July 15th, 1892 in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Approximately because nobody's really sure. Apparently he used different birth dates on different documents. But this is what he said when he signed up for the military. He enlisted in 1917. Wow. And, as you might expect, being a part of the African-American troop in the U.S. Army in the early 1900s, things weren't fair, to say the least. They basically had to clean things, toilets, latrines, fix things. They were kind of ignored.
Yeah.
This drove them nuts. They had to basically, fight to be able to fight.
Now at this point he's basically around 18, right? I think he said it is, yeah. And because World War I has been going on since around 1914. It's been 3 years.
He's about 25, but
no, he's 25.
25.
Wow.
But I'll be honest, when you look at the pictures of him that you can find on Wikipedia, he looks like he's 16. He looks really young. Wow. So who knows? Who knows what, true. Maybe he was born in 1900 and he was lying about it. So yeah, I don't know. They received little training because, again, white America was not going to give them top billing.
Sure.
Even though, obviously, in a war, I would think you take whoever you can get.
Well, and a war that's been going on,
Right.
too. So this war has been going on for a few years, and
That's
they've
right.
already, there's been many young folks have gone to slaughter already,
Yeah.
and you're probably not choosing the cream of the crop at this point. And if you are lucky to get someone who's healthy and fit and
Right.
smart, you might want to give them a little leg up.
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah,
but not.
No. So they became the 300 after several changes. They became the 369th Infantry that was loaned to France. The French needed help, and the French didn't have the same issues with race that we had, whereas the white American soldiers didn't want to fight alongside black American soldiers. The French were more than happy to accept whatever help they could get.
French were looking at this like the way the Americans were simply not, saying
Right.
any help is good help, and
Yeah.
thank you so much for offering it, and we don't care
Perhaps
if you're
if
here.
Nazis were invading America and on our shores and rushing ashore, maybe we would have changed our tune too.
True.
Maybe we would have said, hey,
We
anybody who can fight is welcome to join.
We had the isolationist view. It technically still is someone else's problem.
That's right.
Technically, because it would
Yeah.
be very hard to get across the ocean to get to us.
Exactly.
Although we do want to get over there and
We
knock
felt
this out.
fairly safe, I think, in that respect. They were sent to the Argonne Forest. I think that's how you pronounce it. Basically, they were kind of on the front lines, and it was May 14th, 1918, that he and Needham Roberts were on watch.
That's another soldier.
Yes,
Yeah.
another from the 369th. As their watch was coming to an end, two other soldiers came to relieve them, but Johnson and Roberts didn't feel comfortable. These were kind of junior soldiers that were coming, and they thought these guys can't do it by themselves. So they went above and beyond and stayed extra. And
these guys are exhausted already. They've been on patrol or whatever they're.
it's at night, and
Yeah.
they're taking turns sleeping, from what I understand. So yeah, they're tired. But at some point, they start hearing noises, and Henry is saying to Needham, you need to wake up, because if you don't wake up, you might not ever wake up.
This is going to be.
Yeah. And eventually they just start tossing hand grenades out into the trees, assuming that something's out there. And it's
Something
true.
unfriendly, hopefully.
That something is not, some goats or whatever.
Right.
It's German soldiers. Not sure exactly how many, but it's probably in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 dozen.
Wow.
And they...
And this is pitch black. Like, we have to remember that this is the forest in Europe. There's no light.
Right.
Like, you're
It's
not.
dark.
Maybe if you're lucky, there's a moon. Maybe.
Right.
But it's in pitch black. I mean, imagine how scary. In every direction, you can't trust any direction, probably,
No.
at that point. And you're just standing there in the darkness, waiting for what's coming.
Right.
Throwing grenades.
Exactly. And the Germans they start to fire. And so Johnson suggests that Roberts run back and get reinforcements.
Right.
So he starts running, but quickly turns back and decides he's just got to stay and help fight because, it's 3 guys versus 2 to 3 dozen.
But again, you're running through the dark woods.
Right.
You're quote unquote running. You know what I mean? You're like blind in a closet, trying to get through this. Don't want to slam into a tree.
Obviously, you can just pick up the cell phone and push 911.
Right.
You know.
Turn on his maybe he's had a flashlight or
Exactly.
Did they have? Yeah. It's oh my goodness. Can you
And
imagine how scary?
he gets Roberts gets hit by shrapnel from a grenade, so he's injured. He's down. He's conscious, so he's helping as best he can, and he's basically tossing grenades to Johnson, who's throwing them at the Germans. So it's kind of like the kid down in the snowball fort, tossing the snowballs up to the dude with the awesome arm so he can pick off the enemies. But Johnson's he runs out of ammo, and the Germans just overwhelm.
overrun.
They overrun him.
And in every other instance, that's it.
That's
End of
right,
story.
yeah.
Story over. Wasn't a story. We never even knew what happened.
And
It's
I'm not
over.
sure, this is one of those times where things could have really turned out differently.
Yeah.
This story easily could have been one that we don't tell.
Things always turned out
right.
different. This is one of those stories that it always turns
That's
out
right. The only reason we're telling this story is because he somehow survived.
Yeah.
And not only did he survive, but after running out of ammunition, he took his soldier and he used the butt of the gun. Took his rifle and used the butt of the rifle to beat the Germans over the head, hit them in the face, until the gun broke. And then he just started fighting hand-to-hand combat.
What your mind goes to, because we're so conditioned to see fight scenes in movies, is some elegant, sort of James Bond-ish moment here. But this was probably so primal and so desperate and so just like really probably just like a battle to the death, but in the way that we don't really see it anymore.
Right.
We don't really see it in our minds because we're conditioned, like I said, for films and stuff and everything to be choreographed. This is just an all-out, scratch their eyes out to survive moment.
This isn't like Captain America, Marvel movie,
This is not.
This is
CGI.
He either succeeds or he dies.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the way this goes. There's two outcomes, and he is shot multiple times in the head, in the side, in the arm.
Oh my goodness.
He's stabbed by bayonets twice, and still continues to fight. He's hit over the head and knocked down into the foxhole or the trench or whatever they're in, and he climbs back out and just continues fighting these guys hand to hand.
It's incredible.
As he's doing this,
the adrenaline rush.
he does have a knife. He has a big knife that the American soldiers had. Even though he was fighting for the French and they were using all the French equipment, he does resort to some of the American gear. So at one point, when he runs out of ammunition, he tries to put American bullets in.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, obviously he hasn't tried this in the past because it doesn't work.
Right.
So the gun is useless. He's out of ammo.
This is like the modern day equivalent of like not having the right charger.
Right, exactly. Anybody have an iPhone charger?
Does anyone have the correct charger for this phone?
So he uses his knife that he stabs a couple guys with it. Kills multiple German soldiers. Then he notices that the Germans are dragging Roberts away. They're going to take him prisoner. So he has to go rescue Roberts. In this fight, which lasts approximately an hour. Yeah. Can you imagine how long an hour felt? I don't know. Maybe it went really fast, or maybe it seemed like a year. I'm not really sure what happens. Doing
anything for an hour. Pretty much doing anything like physical for an hour. You go ride your bike for an hour, you're tired.
Most people don't do CrossFit for an hour, I don't think.
Most people don't do CrossFit for an hour.
Right, it's like
flipping
half an hour.
Tires for an hour.
He's wounded 21 times. It's, injuries all over his body. Stabbed, shot. He ends up with a metal plate in his foot. He's got just a whole host of things. He ends up being nicknamed the Black Death by the French.
So he survives this thing, and he and Robert crawl out, and the other two guys who we haven't heard, we don't know anything about these guys, right?
Nothing about them. There's no mention really about them other than they came and they didn't trust they could do the job.
Yeah.
So
those who wants to be those guys?
Right.
Like the guys who didn't even do enough.
That's right.
If you did anything, you've got to get a mention. You kill 3 guys or even help.
Right.
You got it, because Needham's getting a mention, and he was lying there almost unconscious, tossing grenades.
Could you imagine you're the ancestors or descendants of one of these other ancillary characters,
so
and you're like,
I heard your family member was a part of the whole. But we weren't either of those guys.
Have you heard about the World War I hero Henry Johnson? Oh, is that your grandfather? No. But my grandfather was there.
He was there.
He's one of the unnamed.
What was your grandfather doing? There are conflicting stories.
Right.
He told several stories throughout his life.
That's right.
Right.
It ranges from cowering and fear to.
Was that cake? Can I have some cake? Like trying to change the subject.
That's right.
No, we were talking about your grandfather.
That's
though.
right.
Oh yeah. Well,
let's talk about Henry Johnson.
Let's talk about Henry Johnson.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he it's estimated after walking the scene the next day that he killed 4 to 6 and wounded 24 plus Germans by himself. He earned the nickname the Black Death from the French. His whole unit became known as the Harlem Hellfighters because they had so many from Harlem.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And there are some articles in the New York Times archives about the Harlem Hellfighters. He was awarded the Croix de Guerre, which is the military cross from the French, which Roberts also received, but Johnson had his with a special citation and a military palm. So it's kind of like for, extraordinary bravery.
And the other two guys presumably just got like participant ribbons, right? Just
right.
Just a little,
I was there.
Participant, a little T-shirt.
Yes,
I survived.
That's right. They did the Battle of Henry Johnson. I think is what they ended up naming the bridge.
I survived the Battle of Henry Johnson.
Yeah, exactly.
And all I have to show for it is this T-shirt.
This T-shirt. Needham and Johnson were the first Americans to receive that award. He, unfortunately, when he returned to America. It did start out well.
Oh, this isn't going to
They
go
did have a parade that stretched for 7 miles.
Okay.
They were recognized. There were lots of stories. He was in the news. It was always kind of, though, there was one headline or one article. There was a quote was something like, "And we must not forget what the Negro American also contributed."
Gosh.
As yes, he may have been black, but he was able to do something.
The typical
too.
backhanded comment,
Yes,
a backhanded
exactly.
compliment that's like, just
slap to the face while telling you,
right, yeah.
thanks for helping out.
Yeah, we shouldn't forget.
Right. Thanks for helping. I'm not going to pay you.
Right.
His awards came most from the U.S. I mean, the French obviously gave him the award while he was alive, but the other awards came posthumously, which was the Distinguished Service Cross in 2002. The Purple Heart was given to him by Bill Clinton in 1996, and the Medal of Honor by President Obama in 2015.
Around 80 years-ish later,
right.
80 plus years later.
Long after he had passed away.
And he's dead.
Yes.
And
he did have a son, and his son was able to be there to, accept some of the awards in his honor.
That's good.
There were other, military veterans who also, came to receive the awards. So
and when he came back to America, you say that he got some honors, he got some press.
Yep.
But did this roll into a successful career in
At first
anything?
It did. At first he was paid to speak. Mm-hmm. And he was so I've read. I don't have any, a firm thing stating this, but apparently he was charging up to $100 a minute.
Wow.
Which is huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like a ton of money. However, it didn't last because what he was being paid to talk about was, his heroism and how awesome the Americans were, and he's supposed to regale the probably largely white audience with tales about the American fighting machine and
right.
the black and the white fighting together and
toe the patriotic lines.
Yes,
to sort
exactly.
of talk about talk about his heroics, but also talk about how in the great country of America, how someone like him could love his country so much, all glazed, that
right.
he would be willing to do something like this and fight for his country when in fact he's probably marginalized at every turn.
Make the audience members feel good about themselves and their country,
right?
As opposed to telling the truth, which was that they were treated terribly,
right.
and basically given to the French to fight for another country. And he
having in a sense sort of saying that it's not that he didn't love his country, and it's not that he didn't obviously grow up here, and there probably were some positive things about his life, but saying in a sense that what I accomplished was more in spite of
right.
what I was given,
That's
tools
right.
I was given by this country, rather than because of the tools that
That's
the country
right.
gave.
Yeah, I mean, his training was inadequate. They were not fighting with the rest of the American military.
Which is deplorable, but at the same time, it also makes his accomplishment that much more incredible, because it's not like you have this Navy SEAL, highly trained, surgical strike guy who's basically been broken down and built back up into a machine. Instead, it's this guy from North Carolina who's just dropped in here, kind of like every man,
right.
And good luck, and
exactly.
Whatever you got, you get, and that's what you're gonna do.
I mean, it's an underdog story for sure, and he succeeded. He eventually did tell a story about the abuse that the African American soldiers suffered, at the hands of their white soldiers, and how they refused to share the trenches, and so he eventually lost his speaking gig.
Yeah, that did not go over well.
Which was then followed by, he was arrested for wearing his uniform beyond the prescribed date of his commission. Which I'm sure was, these things were kind of all tied to his race.
Yeah.
I mean, were the white Americans being arrested for wearing their uniform beyond the prescribed date of their commission? I don't know. It's possible, but I'm kind of doubting it. He did.
There probably were cases of it, but I doubt it was a hero.
Right.
Someone who clearly came back with heroism painted all over them, and there probably was some sort of Rambo-esque drifter who gets picked up and he gets in trouble, but we're talking about a guy who was. He
violated the unwritten agreement of his, speaking engagement and his role in the military, which was yes, exactly. He suffered from tuberculosis and eventually died of myocarditis in 1929. So, at 37 years old, approximately, not that long after his time in the military.
At a really young age.
At a young age. And he died in poverty and obscurity.
Yeah, that's tragic.
It is tragic. He has this great quote, though, that I kind of want to end this with, which was, he was a pretty humble guy, and he generally had to be prodded to talk about what he did. And this is what he said about it. There wasn't anything so fine about it. I just fought for my life. A rabbit would have done that. Which I think is kind of goes back to what we've talked about in the past, which is can you do it?
Right.
I don't know. I just did what I had to do. I didn't plan to join the military, be treated poorly, not get trained, and then be sent to fight for the French, and then end up fighting 2 to 3 dozen Germans by myself in hand-to-hand combat.
Well, and exactly, and what it says, it's true. We have mentioned this before, because you really find yourself in a situation where you're, if something like this, something extraordinary happens to you, and you survive something extraordinary. The average person who hears the story will say, whatever that story may be, the average person who hears the story will say, well, I couldn't have done it. But it's exactly the thing. The person that you're saying this to couldn't have done it either, except
they did.
They had to, and they did. So
exactly,
it folds into you didn't. Well, no. If someone says, hey, you want to go do this today, this afternoon, I'd say, no, I can't do that. But if I was there and I've got no option, maybe I can.
How many soldiers died in World War I, right?
Yeah.
The number is extraordinary. And how many died fighting less than 2 to 3 dozen Germans by themselves?
How many stepped out of a trench and were shot immediately?
Exactly.
Before they even, because they were sent over the breach. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
So it's it's extraordinary and it's amazing, but he was very humble about it. Mm-hmm. And, it fully admits that he just did what he had to do at that moment, which was just fight for his survival.
Yeah, yeah. What I love about this story and this episode is the fact that your story is about this great, amazing sense of somebody who was completely unprepared for something, set there, they were put in an insane situation, and they came out of it and they survived, and it's a very serious, very heart-wrenching story that also is inspiring. Conversely, my story this week is kind of pretty much, I would say it's pretty much exactly the opposite of your story.
So, yeah,
my story, instead of the guy who goes over and does something extraordinary and comes home and is sort of just marginalized and left on the fringes, my story is about a bunch of guys who go do something that they're supposedly over prepared for and don't really come out of it even remotely as successful as your guy did, and yet there are statues about these gentlemen.
So, not underdogs.
Overdogs.
Not treated poorly.
Is it an overdog?
Not underprepared. Massive failures. Treated like heroes.
Yes. Yes. Different color skin.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Also different country. This is a story about the Burke Wills Expedition in Australia. And it takes place in 1860. This is really, really cool because this is one of those moments in history that probably could easily have worked and just didn't really in the way it was planned out. The government had decided that they wanted to run a telegraph cable from Melbourne, Australia, to the Northern Territories because recently some telegraph lines had been connected to Europe, and they knew that Melbourne, which had been a gold rush city, was kind of on the cusp of becoming a really, really dominant city, and it really needed this to communicate outward to Europe. So they'd been trying this committee had been formed. They'd been trying for years to get someone, the qualified person, to go up there with a group and really just map the territory. They weren't even actually trying to run the line yet. They were just trying to figure out where they were going to run the line, because it's a lot of the outback, and at the time, other than the Aborigine people, the coastal sort of white settlers, they didn't really know the inland territories at all.
And there had been a lot of explorers, obviously, prior to these guys.
Oh yeah.
And Lewis and Clark, huge expedition that comes to mind. And I would imagine even without mass communication, word of those types of things probably got to Australia and these guys, right?
And exploring was always like a really sexy thing. I mean, you watch Indiana Jones, and I mean, it's not that it isn't. There was a cool thing. It was like that was a way to get fame and honor and really ultimately money, and especially in places like the UK and Australia and other things. And even here, it was a great, I mean, you want to be a hero and to be known, that's how you did it. That's one of the great ways to do it, and a really cool thing to do. But although sort of Lewis and Clark, it's dangerous out there without a doubt, but Australia's got some dangers that are. I mean, Australia's like almost everything wants to kill you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Didn't it kind of start as a penal colony?
Yes.
And I kind of think
like the Australian itself for white settlers was trying to be killed or left to be left,
Right. And it's so I don't, it's obviously it's not like, hey, let's send people we dislike to the most friendly, awesome, habitable place on the planet. It was kind of like
Greece.
Right, yeah.
Barbados sounds nice.
I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I'm thinking maybe, these creatures that want to kill you or not that want to kill you, but will kill you.
They will.
Right. This has long been known.
Yes. And it's not just creatures, it's plants. Right. I mean, if you even go in the water, the jellyfish will kill you, sharks, everything wants to eat you.
That's right.
So there's been a fund set up of $2,000. 2,000 pounds. It's a reward to try to find somebody to do this, and nobody will do it. Mostly because the committee itself, who has several explorers on it, they're capable, but they fight each other, kind of in a sense, all wanting to do it or not wanting the other guy to do it, and they don't like each other. So basically, they're at a standstill. Finally, somewhere along the line, they decide in 1860, as I said, that they found some people. They're going to do it, and they hire this guy named Robert Burke to run the expedition, and this other gentleman named William Wills is going to be the surveyor. So it's the Burke Wills Expedition now. The problem is that Burke, who was born in Ireland and was an ex-officer in the Austrian army, and had no familiarity whatsoever with the Australian outback. You would think, now, history is riddled with stories like this. The last guy for the job gets the job. I mean, it's the failing upwards thing, right? So,
middle management.
Middle management, right there.
It's your boss.
This is what they come up with.
That's
so
right.
Wills, who has a much better understanding of bushcraft, in Australia, we know that the outback is known as the bush. He's much more capable, but Burke is the leader, and Burke is not a good leader. And he ultimately has the final say on everything. So the expedition starts out. It is bloated and overconfident from the get-go. They collect in Royal Park in Melbourne on August 20th, 1960, and there's a crowd that's gathered of 15,000 people to see this expedition off. So this is no small thing, right? The caravan consists of 19 men, 23 horses, 6 wagons, and 23 camels. And there is an oil painting of the day that was actually sort of like mapped out and painted based on the day. And the people have come out in their finest clothes. It looks very regal and heroic, and it looks like it's already a success at this point. So the wagons are lined up, and as I said, there are 6 wagons, but there are 3 more than there should be, because for a couple of reasons. First, they have so much equipment and supplies. They've got a table and chairs to sit and dine. They've got a Chinese gong. I don't know what that's for. I can't even think of what that was for. They've decided, instead of the traditional way of exploring, which would be to drive cattle along with you and slaughter them along the way to eat, they've decided to try this new thing called carrying with them dried beef, which required them to take 3 extra wagons with them to carry this along instead of the cattle themselves.
I think this seems like the perfect expedition to try out a bunch of new things.
Let's try some new stuff.
New
technology.
This committee, do you think they're thinking, wow, this is going to be a smashing success? Or are they all like, how do I get my name off of this thing, because this is a...
Well, or you wonder if some guy on the committee's got a line on the beef. He's got invested in this dried beef business, which has got...
Maybe he got a contract.
If Burke comes back with the success in the dried beef thing, we're golden.
Right.
We got a new thing going here. This is fantastic. This is the kind of branding we need for our dried beef and our square wagon wheels. Let's do that.
Our gong.
And our gong. The Chinese. You want to corner the market on the Chinese gong. The Chinese gong market.
This expedition is sponsored by George's Chinese Gongs.
Yeah, Randy's Chinese Gongs. So the expedition starts off. And by the way, one of the committee members, apparently someone with a little bit of foresight, says to Burke, "Hey man, I've got a little outpost up here, whatever. Why don't I bring all this stuff up to you, and so you don't have to carry it all this way. We'll send a bunch of people with a lot of this, and we'll meet you part way, because you got a long way to go before they sort of leave the known territories. We'll meet you part way. You have to drag all this up. We'll do it, and we'll drop it for you, and you can pick it up, and then you can keep going on your way." And Burke says, "No, I'm good. I got it. I got this." And so he leaves Melbourne Park, all loaded down, and of course, and they're bringing about 20 tons worth of stuff. By the way, now think about that, like in 6 wagons.
6 wagons with 20 tons
that have to go over unknown.
So it's like over 3 tons a wagon.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the wagons breaks down before they leave the park. So is this foreshadowing? I think it might be foreshadowing.
I think so.
I think this was a sign.
Everyone's cheering, and then it's just, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, the sign from God is not all the people who shut up. It's the wagon that broke down before you even left the park.
So literally the wheels started to come off.
Literally.
Right.
The wheels start to come off this thing before they
leave town.
Before they even made it out of the park. Much less town. They did make it out of town. The first night, they sleep within the city limits. That's how. And now they left at like 4 p.m, which again, what was that about?
They couldn't find their shoes, or right?
Yeah. A last minute things. Yeah.
Where did I put my shoes?
Exactly. Doesn't everyone leave at dawn? I mean, isn't that like a thing? You leave at dawn.
Generally, that's...
You don't leave at 4 in the afternoon.
Especially if, I mean, I would think you'd want to get out of sight of the massive crowd.
True.
On your first day.
Absolutely.
Because,
it's a little embarrassing.
Like, if the wheels fall off the next day, but nobody sees it...
It's... So, I mean, in a sense, you want to get at least far away from the cheers.
That's right.
Before you start a fire, put up a tent and start a fire to sit around. Yeah. People walking past you.
Right.
To get home.
Yeah.
While you're camped. Your expedition
Dad,
to the northern
aren't those guys we just saw?
Those look a lot like...
Right, yeah.
Once that oil painting is done, I'm going to double check.
That's
I'm going
right.
to check. I can't remember by memory. When that oil painting's, I'm
pretty sure.
Pretty sure that's the same
There's
guys.
a bunch of camels.
I mean, I don't know. It's usually not like 6 wagons with 20 tons in them, like in my neighborhood.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
A bunch of camels and...
Benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
So they leave the town. Eventually they do move along. But... again, we're walking. The wheels are coming off. Right, there's so many signs this is going badly. So right away, pretty soon, right after they leave, they realize that they have to start leaving. They've got too much stuff. They start leaving provisions behind. They start with some sugar and lime juice and guns and ammunition. They're dropping it. They start to have to limit. They decide they're going to limit the personal luggage to 30 pounds per person, and perhaps the most damning thing in the moment is that Burke decides he's going to dump 60 gallons of rum, which fantastically, and I don't really understand what this is about, because there's this guy named Landells, who was the second in command on the journey, and probably would have been the Burke Landells expedition, except that Landell had the foresight to go, I'm super upset that you're dumping the rum. We feed it to the camels, apparently. They thought it warded off scurvy. And Landells leaves the expedition along with the expedition's surgeon.
These were smart men.
Landell's name's not on the expedition.
That's right.
He's a smart man.
Except, are there any Landell statues?
No.
Good point. He probably also...
There might be. I guess there could be.
There could be.
Maybe he's the statue of the guy who...
It's like, here's the smartest man in the expedition.
Yeah. There's a statue of Burke and a statue of Landell, looking very healthy and confident, walking the other way, and maybe Burke standing there arrogantly, pointing north, dumping rum,
dumping rum. I mean,
camels standing around looking thirsty.
Limiting the amount of luggage you can bring on a trip after you have left. Seems like you have not prepared well. You have not thought this through very well, right? I mean, they're rolling down the road at 1 mile per hour because they have 3-ton wagons, and throwing their provisions out the back, right?
Yeah, you and your wife are headed on a trip, and you get out of the driveway. You make it maybe just outside of town. Let's say you make it the far,
which has happened.
You look at each other and go, "Honey, we've got way too much stuff."
Yes, that has happened.
What can we get rid of?
Right.
We don't need this.
What's in this bag? I don't know.
Why did we bring 6 volleyballs?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know why we brought 6 volleyballs. Yes. Let's throw 5 of them away.
Right.
This is not the way to start off a journey.
No,
absolutely not.
Not when you're going thousands of miles in the outback.
Right. Yeah. Just over.
And I mean, and they didn't really. I mean, they knew what was at the other end of the journey, right? The ocean, because that's where they were going. But they didn't really. Obviously, this is a mapping expedition. They're not really too sure about what they're going to encounter.
You know, you're going to run into rocks and bushes and like cracked earth and rattlesnakes and things that you have to navigate. You're going to have to like slowly move wagons like you see in any, any sort of American expedition, move them slowly through some of these things. And yeah, you know it's going to be tough.
They don't know if there's like canyons or rivers.
They don't know.
Rapids.
They don't know.
Waterfalls.
No.
Giant lakes. Right?
All things I would like to have a lot of rum with me to have to deal with, to navigate. Yeah.
Can you imagine what the men on this, and I'm assuming it was all men.
Yes.
On this expedition were thinking as they watched the rum get.
They were thinking, there goes our rum.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's how sort of sailors survive for years.
Oh, yeah.
Then rum was typically a little more watered down than you would call rum today. But yes, that would be how a sailor, they would drink it because the water would go bad.
Oh yeah, right.
Or the beer, they drink beer and because the water would actually go pungent and spoil, and
right.
so that would last longer. So they're watching this continue to devolve, and
right.
and they don't probably have many options. And the guy at the front, maybe they're starting to slowly figure out this guy, but a couple of people do leave. In fact, this is actually the next point, in that in 2 months they had traveled 470 miles. Now that's significant because it's a distance that the mail coach, the normal mail coach, does in just over a week. So, and does that same route, by the way. Not like it's like they haven't actually left known civilization yet.
Right. So they haven't conquered any new territory.
Nothing's conquered.
So they could have asked the mailman to
conquered their fear of leaving things behind. That's what they have. That's
right.
what they've done, which they clearly had in the beginning. And at this point also, 15 members of the original party of 19 have already quit or been fired, and they now have added 8 men. So there's now fewer of them overall.
Who joins this expedition at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
The guys leaving are like,
yeah.
Okay,
they're
good
like,
luck with that one.
You do not want to do this. I think I got this.
Yeah.
I think it's your fault.
Right.
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling confident.
Right.
I think I'm gonna be all right.
Yeah, exactly.
I like going places out on your rum and no lime juice.
Right.
It's just...
they should have just asked the mailman to make this journey. Apparently,
they should have mailed themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
They could have mailed the rum. They could have mailed the sugar.
That's right.
And the ammunition.
Yeah.
And this would have helped them out, which they were offered to do in a sense, and they chose not to. So another skilled explorer decides he wants to join the race because, of course, there's a bounty.
Right.
He's going to make 2,000 pounds if he makes it. So now the pressure is really on, and Burke now has to push through. He can't do this bloated, slow-moving thing. It's really got to get serious.
400 miles in 2 months isn't going to cut it.
So he splits up the group and to gain speed and to reach a place called Cooper Creek. And that's pretty much the end of where the known territories that's ever been mapped or explored by white settlers ends. And so he dashes ahead to Cooper Creek. He grabs a couple of people and some of their supplies. He leaves the bulk of the group behind, but they're going to follow, but they're going to sort of take longer.
This strategy makes no sense to me, because is he going to go all the way to the end without the rest of the people
and without the supplies?
Right.
So
he's going to rush ahead and then just sit around waiting?
I think his intention is to get to Cooper Creek and then either have because he has to keep going, to get to Cooper Creek and then stage again from there and then try to push to the north, hoping that when he turns around and gets back to Cooper Creek, all that stuff has made it there, and then they get to eat.
I mean, it was making zero sense to me, but then I thought, I don't know, everything about this makes zero sense at this point. So maybe he really was.
Maybe
that
he knew
dumb.
something we don't. Yeah, maybe there was some stuff. So he moves on, and he makes it to Cooper Creek in the 11th of November, which is about 3.5 months after leaving Melbourne. So they've traveled about 850 miles in 3.5 months. And
so he's sped up slightly. He's gone another similar distance in a couple weeks less.
It's made a significant difference. Okay. Yeah, because it's less people and they're moving a lot faster. Yeah, absolutely. So he makes it there, and then he sets up camp. And of course, and again, another of the this is maybe something is off here. The camp that he sets up is overrun by rats, and they have to move camp. It's still in Cooper Creek. Then they decide they're going to wait. Now it's November. They decide they're going to wait until March. Because let's not forget that the seasons in Australia, we're up in North America, but in the seasons in Australia are reversed. So it's now summer. In one of the hottest places in this entire country, it can be up to 122 degrees.
And so again, the strategy makes no sense. Like, I'm going to rush ahead so I can just sit around.
Wait.
Yeah.
Right. Then it really, you're right. At that point, you're just, what were you thinking?
Right. Why not just stay with the expedition and go slow?
We can lumber along.
Right.
We got plenty of time anyway. Yeah. And so but he doesn't wait. He must have done your math and says this doesn't make any sense. Right. So I'm going to push on. But what he does is he leaves a select group. Again, he splits up the group. So they're headed towards the Gulf of Carpentaria, which is in northern Australia, and he splits up the group and leaves a contingent back at Cooper Creek. And he and 3 other guys head north. He leaves this guy named Brahe back, and he sets off to. And Brahe is his instructions are to wait 3 months, and if we don't come back, we're probably not going back. So Burke tells Brahe this, and Burke takes off with. He took off with I think it was 4 other guys. Wills, King, Gray, and himself. Maybe it's just those 4. And so he leaves the most of the provisions back and takes off. And as he's leaving, Wills, who's the more experienced guy, turns around and sort of sneaks back to Brahe and says, "Make it 4 months."
I was gonna say, I mean, Burke sounds like the eternal optimist for no good reason.
Yeah,
I mean, like. You took how long to go 800 miles, and you think you're going to do the rest of this journey out and back in 3 months?
Absolutely. Yeah, he's obviously delusional. I mean, he's looking for the glory, and the glory is in doing it whatever his brain, the gymnastics his brain, sort of turns this into for himself to be the most glorious. 3 months, not going to happen. Wills says, make it 4 months. So they start to move on, and apparently they find that it actually wasn't really hard moving. They're a little lighter on their feet. The spring rains were pretty heavy, so there's water. The Aborigines, they weren't sure whether they were going to be friendly or not, but they turned out to be friendly enough and let them pass. And by February, they have now made it to a small river that leads them into the Gulf of Carpentaria. But it's all swampland and marshland. And Burke and Wills, they can't move. They're just...
So did the one thing they not bring was like a boat?
They didn't bring a boat. They do have 6 camels with them, but they don't have a boat.
I mean, like not even a canoe?
They didn't have a canoe.
I mean, what...
You could probably hollow out a canoe at this.
Wouldn't you think that it's possible we might encounter water?
No. Oddly, yes, because part of the expedition was an attempt to discern whether there was an inland ocean in the middle of Australia.
And yet they brought no watercraft.
Nothing for water. They didn't. No, they didn't bring anything. No. Maybe they brought a paddle.
They brought how many tons? 20 tons?
20 tons and nothing to float that floats. I'll bring something. I think the floating thing would. You even get an airplane. Right. You got something that floats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Today, but that's modern thinking.
Yes.
This is 1860. People weren't thinking about that kind of thing back then.
At least they weren't.
They certainly were not. So Burke and Wills try to push on through the marshland, and they do, and they make it about 15 miles, and they just can't keep going. There's no way. And I don't know at this point how far they are from the actual coast, but it's not far. I mean, they must be within 30 miles.
Because what was the total distance of this?
It's something like 1,000 miles. It's okay. Maybe a little more than that. 1,200 miles. It's significant.
Yeah.
So they turn back and meet the folks at the beginning of the marshland. The guys at the beginning of the marshland they left behind, and because they're almost out of food now, and they have less. They've now run down to less than half what they need. What they left with. So, in other words, it took them more provisions to get up there than they need to get back.
Right.
They've gone past the halfway point, and and they need to go backwards 2 months to get back to Cooper Creek and Brahe, who's sitting there with all of the supplies. So to make matters worse, they're traveling back now in the fall because they've walked all the way through the summer in the 122-degree heat. And it's now become rainy monsoon season in the North Tropics in Australia.
And is it now muddy?
Okay. Rainy, lashing rain, wind. I can't say it's every day, but it is the season for it. And they've begun to shoot and eat the camels on their way and a horse. they're beginning to abandon yet more equipment, and they start eating a local plant, which they have learned from the Aborigines that they can eat. But we'll find out later that they're sort of eating it wrong, and that's causing them more problems than they realize.
The Aboriginals maybe were thinking everybody knows that you have to prepare it this way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
it's
so
like,
maybe they
it's
just
like
don't
fugu,
tell them.
Fugu. If you don't prepare it properly, you might not.
Right.
Yeah. So they also eat. They find and eat an 11-pound python, which I think is pretty. That speaks to what your needs out there in the bush. Burke and another man named Gray come down with dysentery, and shortly after Gray's caught stealing. So Burke beats him relentlessly.
Just stealing
food.
Okay, to eat. I was thinking like he's just loading up his pockets with stuff and
stealing stuff. Right. His his watch. Hey, where's my watch?
Why do your pockets look so big? It's just stuff I brought with me.
I had a gold chain. Right. Anyone seen my gold chain? I hung it on this tree branch while I was sleeping overnight. Everyone, turn out your pockets. Right. It's Gray. Beat him.
I had that with me the whole time.
He's stealing. I brought one that looked just like yours. I meant to say something about it. I just forgot.
Right. I kept it in my pocket.
Wasn't me. So he's caught stealing food, clearly, and he's beaten to within an inch of his life, and he actually does die shortly after, although Burke is not blamed for Gray's death, but I have a feeling it had something to do with it.
May have contributed.
So the party makes it back to Cooper Creek on April 21st. Now, they left like November 11th or something like that, or somewhere around there. And so it's been quite a while. It's been 18 weeks after they left, as a matter of fact. And as fate would have it, Brahe, who waited even longer than the 3 months and longer than the 4 months that he was told to wait, has left because he was running low on supplies and he himself was not feeling so well, possibly having scurvy or something. But he has left 9 hours before Burke and Wills show up back at the camp.
So, in the grand scheme of things, it's like he just left. I mean, when you take this whole trip from beginning to end, it's like...
Yeah, 7 minutes.
You just missed this guy.
You might as well be 9 minutes.
Right.
Because it's 9 hours. Exactly. You've gone.
And I mean, considering how slow they are able to move, he's probably not very far away, right?
He's probably not. Now, Burke and Wills are, and King, who's with them as well, they're pretty beat up. But yeah, you're right. It's not a huge amount of distance in time, considering. Yeah.
Probably a few miles.
Probably. I mean, maybe they made it 20 miles. I don't know. 20. I don't know. But it's not far.
Not far.
So, but despite this, Burke decides that they are going to walk in a different direction.
I mean, do they have anything left at this point? Are they?
So, what happens now, they're pretty much out of everything and they're really wiped out. So Brahe has taken the steps of leaving some provisions behind, just hoping maybe they'll come, maybe they'll show back up. And what he's done is he's dug a hole and buried provisions, covered it over, and then marked in a tree the date and the word dig.
He seems like a much smarter man.
He may have. He might very well have. It's possible that he and Wills may have done this if that's what they all would have done it if Burke had not been heading this thing.
Right.
Yeah, because they do seem pretty intelligent when it comes to this sort of thing, and Burke does see that there's this carving on the tree, and they dig up the food, and now they have some provisions. But as I mentioned, despite Wills and King begging, Burke decides, no, we're not going to follow them. We're not going to go after them. We're going to go somewhere else where we know there's a station out there, a camp of some sort that's manned, and we're going to head there instead, in a different direction. So they start. They're about to start off, but before they do, they decide, what we're going to do here is we're going to leave our own note to them if the case they come back. So they, in the hole where they dug up the provisions, they write a note that says, hey, we've gone in a different direction. This is where we're going. We're going to go up Cooper Creek, and we're going to go to this station. And Wills kind of secretly leaves his diary and his notebooks there because he doesn't want Burke to know that some of what he wrote in there. And they bury this over, and they leave. Unfortunately, they make a massive error. They don't change the marking on the tree. So everything, if you were to come back into this camp, looks exactly the way it was that as you left it, right? So you would have no idea that. So we'll see how that plays out.
Right. They are now up Cooper Creek.
They're up Cooper Creek. They're up Cooper Creek. Yeah, without a paddle.
Right.
Or a canoe. You got nothing. and so Wills is out of camp as they walk for a while, and Wills is out of camp for a while, and Burke, in his continued genius, he shoots at a group of Aborigines who are coming too close. He doesn't hurt any, but pretty much assuring that they will not help, because that's the only. I mean, there are Aboriginal tribes around, and they have been somewhat helpful, or at least friendly. So this is his idea of a good move.
I think whatever he thinks, he should do the opposite.
Right. Yes, that's what he should definitely do. And in addition to this, they also build what's called a whirly, which is it's just a lean-to kind of like shelter made out of whatever branches and things like that. And they build it, and they use it to cover their provisions, but they build it too close to their fire, and the whirly catches on fire and burns up much of their provisions. Yes. I'm not making this up.
It shouldn't surprise me, right?
It shouldn't surprise you. So, Brahe, who is headed back, runs into that party we mentioned earlier, the first one who were left furthest behind, who's sort of slowly lumbering its way up, and Brahe and the man who's in charge of that party named Wright bump into each other, and decide they're going to turn around because they now have provisions, and they're going to go back to Cooper Creek and see if they get lucky, and these guys are back there. At this point now, Wright, who's leading the bigger expedition following, turns out he gets himself in a lot of trouble because of all the people in all of this, he's the one who's the vilified the most because he took too long to follow.
So he was the one that they left behind.
Yes.
First. And then there
Brahe.
was right, and then there was the second group, Brahe, right, that they also left behind.
That's right. And he gets called careless and lazy after everything, and really just sort of like takes the brunt of all of this after the fact. But they head back up to Cooper Creek, and they arrive up there on May 8th. At this time, Burke and Wills and King, who were together and traveling, have already headed in the wrong direction and are about 35 miles away. But, as I mentioned, they did not change the markings on the tree. So the returning rescuers have no idea they've even been there. No idea. So they turn around and they go, oh, well, too bad.
They didn't get here.
We did it.
Yeah.
We walked all the way back, and, there's no way.
So there's a lot of things that could have gone right here. They could have changed the marking.
Yep.
They could have just stayed there. They could have headed in the direction and they would have run into them.
They would have bumped right into them.
Right.
Yeah, would have slammed right into them.
He did just enough.
Just enough.
Wrong.
Yep. To do what's going to do to himself what's going to happen to him. And so, incidentally, by the way, this tree is still there. It's called the Dig Tree, and it's actually a really famous tree in Australia. You can actually see it today. There's plaques and things like that.
Nice.
So in late June, the three guys, Burke, Wills, and King, are still traveling up Cooper Creek. Now they've run into problems because it's tough going, and they're looking for an Aboriginal campsite. Wills has become too weak to walk. he can't do anymore. So he insists on being left behind, and Burke and King continue on for a couple days. But it's not long before Burke can't go any further either. So Burke dies. King, who's with Burke, stays with his body for a couple days, but then walks back to where Wills was and finds Wills dead. So King does end up coming across a group of Aborigines, and they're called the Yandruwandu, and they do give him shelter and food, and he survives. He is found later that year in September by a search party that's sent out to look for them, for the lost explorers, and at this point now we're over a year after the expedition left Royal Park in Melbourne.
When did they die? This is...
He died probably in June-ish. June.
Okay, so the search party was able to get there
really fast,
right?
They
compared to them,
they
right?
rode the mail wagon.
Man, there was a lot of people that could have done this a lot better, I think.
This is insane. This is like sending you out on your search bike. You're just sending you walking downtown, and the rest of us were going to drive.
Right.
But you're the one that's supposed to go downtown.
That's right.
None of us really have to go there. We're going to wait for you there and pick you up as you're hungry and starving.
I'm convinced that this crowd of 15,000 or whatever at the launch of this expedition and the committee, as soon as they were out of town, they were like, they're screwed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There was people walking home.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is
never
not
gonna
going to
make
end
it.
well.
Yeah.
It's a good point. You have to kind of wonder, were some of those people there going, that wagon looks a little heavy, doesn't it? Yeah, the guy's wearing
I've never done an expedition, but I'm thinking that's not looking good.
This Burke guy, he's got a cane. You know.
And what's that gong about?
What's the gong? Really? So they do find Burke and Will's body later, and they bury them. Oh, this search party does, and they do bury them, but later they are dug up. I don't know exactly when, and moved back to Melbourne, and King is taken back to Melbourne, but the trip is grueling. I mean, he's just really not in a healthy place and physically, and he never really recovers, and he dies 11 years later at the age of only 33. So he's about 22 on this journey. The expedition wasn't like an entire failure. It did prove that there was no inland ocean because they didn't need their boat,
right? Yeah,
and they did map and learn a lot more about the Australian outback, which is interesting. But what really sort of circles us back to your story is that there are statues of these guys. These guys are not. They're not laughing stocks. At least don't seem to be.
Right.
Because it's a well-known expedition. There are statues in Melbourne Park in Royal Park where they left, and others around. It's extremely well-known, and they magnificent. There's a coin, a commemorative coin in 2009, 150 years after the expedition. And these guys are heroes. And the last thing I'll mention about this is the whole plant thing. So remember, they were eating this plant that the Aborigine they learned from the Aborigines. Well, it's a type of seed cake made from a particular plant, but if it's not prepared correctly, like if the seeds aren't ground before you eat it into this little cake or whatever, then what actually happens, you have to grind it to a paste first. The nourishing effects are not actually absorbed by your body, and so instead, as you eat, the shell or something of the seed has an enzyme that actually depletes the body's vitamin B. And the result, which was documented in some of the comments I think that King wrote down, is that you feel completely full, like you just ate plenty, and yet you are becoming weaker and weaker and weaker and eventually die. So our magnificent expedition is upended by complete, mismanagement, and a plant that apparently if you eat it wrong, it kills you instead of feeds you. And you're a hero. It's
amazing. It's like, Hillary and Norgay. get to the top Everest.
Yeah.
But we build statues to the 3 guys that got halfway up and died.
Halfway up and died.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and it's not, and I can get it that you know what, hey, the weather turned, something happened. But almost all of this was within their control.
Did somebody, how about this other guy that joined the race late, did he make it?
I don't know who made it eventually.
I wonder, did somebody get there and then they didn't get statues?
I think it was years and years
okay.
and years before they actually ran this telegraph cable. Yeah. So I think this whole thing ended up sort of being for naught ultimately in the end, as it turns out. I mean, they did.
Maybe they were we can just get in a boat and we can just sail around to the other side.
Let's do that instead. Yeah. We can't lose this many. We can't keep making statues.
No, right.
We don't have the money.
Exactly.
We're going to go broke making statues.
And the amount of rum that was wasted.
The rum alone.
Yes.
We can't keep doing this. No. We're throwing good money after bad.
Right.
Let's just stay down here in Melbourne. We got a good thing.
I'm very glad that you found this lost manuscript from the never produced movie by who's my favorite Life of Brian and
yeah. The Monty Python,
right?
Yeah,
I'm so glad Terry you found the lost Monty Python script.
It's like this. It's like when the episode where the scene where the accountants in the office building and it turns into a ship and they all turn into pirates.
Right.
It's like that. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's totally the Holy Grail.
Yes, it is.
Just
absolutely.
Yeah,
that with the killer rabbit. I mean, it's
just
with
the teeth.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and the swallow, African or European swallow.
Right.
That's true.
I mean, I'm sure that if you were to talk to somebody who maybe an Australian who celebrates these figures.
Sure, I don't know. There's a holiday, maybe. I don't know.
Right?
It's like you take every third Tuesday off.
Maybe the way that they would see it is a little different than the way we see it.
It's
because I see it as a comedy of errors.
Yes.
Just one thing after. I mean, they couldn't get out of the park without.
Maybe I found maybe all the resources I used to explore this were like the ones that the Australians have not sort of certified.
Right.
Maybe this is just sort of like. This is trickled down. People talk. In actual fact,
right.
It went really, really well. This was magnificent.
Yes.
There was magnificence at every step.
Perhaps.
Yeah. These things were out of their control.
That's right.
Who could have known?
Who could have known that any decision other than walking the other direction would have worked out?
Right. Who would have known that you needed to put your provisions 8 feet away from a fire in their tinder dry shelter?
Who would have thought to bring some kind of, water navigational device?
Who would have thought to bring some kind of less?
Right.
Who would have thought to not bring all this sugar?
Who would have thought that bringing a gong was a waste of space?
A gong?
Right.
Who doesn't bring a gong?
Right.
I bring a gong. I'm going out later. I'm going to bring a gong.
Maybe we would find out that all Australian expeditions brought a gong.
Maybe it's a thing.
Right.
Maybe it's a really important thing. Maybe we're missing that.
That's right.
I think you're right. It's all about cultural perspective. Maybe we're missing a huge point here. Yeah.
I do wonder that because it seems so absurd. This whole thing.
Mm-hmm. It feels
and
like
yet,
it's really absurd.
From beginning to end, every single thing about it seems absurd. Like it was destined to failure before they even picked Burke and Wills.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it seems like
the committee couldn't even get along. Yeah.
So it seems like from that moment on, it was doomed to failure, and yet they end up with statues and
Henry Johnson dies a pauper.
Right.
An unknown, except for to the French.
Yeah.
And is has to wait 80 years for his.
Right after he's dead, they finally are like, this guy was pretty good.
Technically, that's what happened to our guys too.
That's true. It was after they were dead.
After they were dead, everyone realized how great they were.
Right.
Despite all of the things that happened that led up to their deaths.
Right, because they didn't even survive their event.
You don't know what you got till it's gone.
That's right.
In the case of Henry Johnson, a great hero, a heroic human being. In the case of Burke and Willis, super nice guys.
Right.
Super cool
Well,
dudes.
I mean, was Burke really a nice guy?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to go with yes.
Yes. We'll give him that.
He's a really nice guy.
Right.
Totally known to be a really nice guy.
Naive, unprepared.
Yeah. Doesn't make you not nice.
That's right.
I know a lot of naive people who are really nice.
That's right. We'll just go with nice.
And on that note, we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll be back again. And have you looked at any new stories? Because I've already got one in mind.
Ooh, I've got one or two. I've got them circling a few really interesting ones. Yes. Some new territory, some different things.
I'm going to go with something really heartbreaking.
Good.
Make people cry because you get the funny ones.
I want to bring them down out of this one.
Yeah. I want a funny one too.